We're coming up next week to Yom Yerushalayim, and I wanted to share a following thought with you. Also, I want to mention that we still are in the shloshim of the 45 people that died on Lag BaOmer in Meiron, and I wanted to share a thought with you on that as well too. When we talk about Yom Yerushalayim, one of the great events that took place is a whole number of mitzvos now came available to Bnei Israel, and that one great victory with the building base of Mikdash, Korban Pesach, and there's one of those mitzvahs I want to try to concentrate on. And that is the mitzvah of the Torah, Es Shabsosai Tishmoru Mikdashi Tiro. You shall observe my Shabbosos, and you should show fear to the Mikdash, Ani Hashem. That's in Parshas Kedoshim. Now, regarding the event that took place in Meiron, where the tragedy of 45 people lost their lives, was been pointed out that in the Sefer of the Chassam Sofer on the Torah, actually in Parshas Emor, which was the day after the tragedy, he talks about a hesped. He brings down there a hesped that he was asked to give in a terrible tragedy that took place in Tzfat in the year 1837. In the year 1837, there was a terrible earthquake, and in that earthquake, 1,500 people died, and the city was almost leveled. And they asked the Chassam Sofer to give a hesped, and in his hesped, the Chassam Sofer points out, and he says that of course we know that we have to look for a cause in halacha, in hashkafa. We know, as the Rambam points out, and many of our great Rishonim point out, that we do not believe that such events like this come by accident, and it comes under the rules of hashkafa. And we have a chiyuv, Rambam says a chiyuv, to look and search our actions, our deeds, and to see if we have done anything wrong. And of course we cannot tell what the exact reason is, but we have a chiyuv to search ourselves and to see what, if any, that we could find major mitzvos or violations of the Torah we are committing. Now the Chassam Sofer, following that route, the Chassam Sofer pointed out to the people of Tzfat, and he said, everyone in Tzfat is going up to Meiron, is going up to the Kever of Shem Bar Yochai. And what about Yerushalayim? They're forgetting about Yerushalayim, Yer Kodesh. They're all running to Meiron, and Yerushalayim doesn't count. And how could you give up Yerushalayim? And he attributes the cause to the neglect of Kedushas Yerushalayim. Now, we have a mitzvah clearly in the Torah, Mikdashi Tiro. You have to show fear to the Mikdash. And it's very clear from the Rambam that mitzvah applies even today, even though the base of Mikdash is not standing. It's mitzvah number 21 in the minyan of mitzvahs of the Rambam, and the Tag mitzvahs are mitzvahs which are always in force, and therefore the Rambam numbers it mitzvah 21. And in Hilchos Beis Bechira, in Perek Zayin, the Rambam explains how do you fulfill that mitzvah? How are you supposed to fulfill the mitzvah of showing yira to the Makom HaMikdash? And the Rambam says very clearly, when you walk on the Har Habayit without shoes, without your walking stick that was a cane that was used for kavod, without your money belt, that shows yira. That shows you're coming to the Har Habayit, you recognize the kedusha. You walking barefoot, ki admas kodeshu. This is the land, what you're stepping on is kodesh. And that's how you express in Makayim the mitzvah, Mikdashi Tiro. Now, it's a very controversial topic today about going up on the Har Habayit. So I'd like to first clarify that number one, that nobody has the authority to be oker a mitzvah from the Torah. Even a Navi should be Israel. A Navi can't be oker a mitzvah from the Torah. Certainly we cannot be oker mitzvah from the Torah. Now the controversy moves on where everyone has their list, who's mata, who's not mata, but they want to bring out the problem of walking in areas which would violate the Torah and would be an Issa Kares according to the Rambam. So on this point I want to clarify. There is in the structure of the Har Habayit a part of that inner structure which is called the Chel. Some say it was a small wall, others say it was a different type of stone that you could recognize that you're coming up to the Chel. And that Chel was instituted by the Chachamim to tell people that you're approaching the areas which one cannot enter if he is Tamei Meis. And that would be, which us, say we're all Tamei Meisim. And if we enter there today, because we don't have Paraduma, you have cars. But up to the Chayal, if a person went to a mikveh, and again I want to stress, that means a mikveh that has kosher deraisa. So the mikvahs that are made for women are all kosher deraisa. But many mikvahs that are made for men, they're not necessarily kosher deraisa, because what's the need? But if you're going to go to the Har Habayit, you must be sure that you're going to a mikveh that has kosher deraisa. One who immerses himself in a mikveh that's kosher deraisa is allowed to walk up to the Chayal. The halacha is clear. No one argues on that halacha. It's a Mishnah, it's a Gemara, it's a Rambam, it's an Igros Moshe, Rav Chaim Kanievsky's Sefer on the Rambam. Clear. There's no one argues on that. Now the point was that I know where the Chayal is. So over the years, since 1967, great archaeological information has been given to us. If you take what's called the tunnel tours, they show you where the Har Habayit, where the mountain comes to an end. There's no more mountain. You go down to the bedrock. So now we know that the Chayal cannot reach what we call today the Western Wall. It's actually Herod's Western Wall. The Chayal cannot reach in the inside up to that wall. Because if the Chayal would reach that Western Wall, then the rest of the Har Habayit isn't on the mountain. It will be in the valley. That's an impossibility. And the same thing, if the Chayal would reach the extremities of the eastern wall, that can't be either, because then the remainder part of the Har Habayit is in the valley. There's a valley there as well too. So we know the Chayal cannot reach those two walls. So it's clear if you take a path that's close to the eastern wall and the western wall, you did not cross the Chayal. Now on the other sides you don't have a wall, which is such clear demarcation. So Moshe says, use your estimation, pretty much how much you kept the distance from the dome of from the Even HaShia, and you estimate and you keep that same distance. So if you move away a few more feet. So it's clear that there's a path that absolutely doesn't cross the Chayal. And you makayim the mitzvah mikdashi tiro. That's a mitzvah doraisa. No one could be oka that mitzvah. Now I know people say we have many gedolim that answer it based on their understanding. We have to keep in mind we have a clear Gemara that says divrei Rav, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishamim. The words of your Rebbe. Who is the Rebbe the Gemara is talking about? It's talking about the Rebbe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's our greatest Rebbe. He's giving us the Torah. That's what he's giving us. We're studying his Torah. So if HaKadosh Baruch Hu says one din, and the Talmidim, everyone's a Talmud of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they say another din, you listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And to just point out, to clarify that point, we see the great Chet HaEgel, which Klal Yisrael sinned by worshipping the golden calf. But if you look at the Psukim, we find that Aaron, in Kisisa, Aaron told the people, take off your earrings, your nose rings, and bring them forward. And Aaron says, "V'ya Aaron, v'yivim mizbeach lefanav." Aaron built a mizbeach. V'ikra Aaron v'yomar, and Aaron calls out and says, "Chag l'Hashem mocha." So now the people, why were they held to blame? What do you want? We listened to Aaron. Well, we listened to Aaron at that time was the Gadol Adon. Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't there. Aaron was second. Now he's first. So the Gadol Adon says, "When Chag Hashem Mocha, we're going to make a big party tomorrow." So why were the people held responsible? Why is that considered the great Chet of Am Yisrael? The answer is because Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishamim. The Rav is a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He said Avodah Zarah is Asa. Period. Aaron is a Talmud of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So you listen to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Now, of course, you're going to say, well, didn't Aaron know? Of course. Aaron had his cheshbon, the Mefarshim explained, give different reasons. Rashi gives a very nice reason. He said Aaron at this time didn't know what to do. The people were rebelling, so Aaron thought he will stall the people. By the time they give the gold, by the time they melt it down, by the time they build the Mizbech, for sure he thought that Moshe Rabbeinu will be back. So the Gedolim have their assessment of the situation. They have their responsibility as they look at the problem. That's their guidance, which they have to decide what to do. But each individual has his responsibility. And each individual should have known that Avodah Zarah is Asa. Aaron is doing it because that's the way he looks at it. Fine. But we, the individuals, have to look at it from our way. Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishamim. That's the same situation that occurred today. When, after the Har Habayit was liberated in 1967 on Yom Yerushalayim, there was a time that really people did not know where things were. We really weren't there for 2,000 years. The sand covered up most of the Har Habayit. The Brisker Rav thought, but they look at the Kosel Maravi today, which again is Herod's Kosel Maravi, he was Mesubik, maybe that's the Kosel of the Azara, so he would walk in the whole area there. So they weren't sure. But now, after over 50 years, and like I mentioned, great archaeological achievements have been done, we know where things are. We know which parts the Chayil cannot reach, which parts it's impossible to read the Chayil, for the Chayil to reach. We know which parts you could walk through without any question whatsoever. So you have a mitzvah deraisa mikdashi tiro, to covering yira to the base hamikdash. And going up there fulfills the mitzvah. We do not have the right to uproot a mitzvah from the Torah. Now, following along the lines of the Chassam Sofer, which he made the equation to the tragedy in 1837 of Tzfat, to the negligence of Yerushalayim. Remember, he didn't have the Har Habayit under Jewish control. Although later that year, there was a great opportunity to bring Korban Pesach, and he wrote the Tshuva how to do it, but that idea didn't work out. But anyway, he's talking about people who were neglecting Yerushalayim. We're talking about neglecting the Har Habayit, not showing covenant year to the Har Habayit. How could we neglect that? So following that path, we could definitely say that this is one of the great transgressions of our nation today. And I will point out that pasuk is found in Kedoshim. That means they lamed this pasuk the Shabbos before Lag BaOmer. That means there were 100,000 people heard this pasuk in the Torah, because you could be sure those people weren't sure that Shabbos before. And they heard the Baal Koreh say, Mikdashi Tiro, you should show fear to my Mikdash. How do you show fear? By walking on the Har Habayit, by walking on the places we know is mutter. 100,000 people go to Meiron. How many people go to the Har Habayit? All Pesach, with great efforts from many organizations. We got 4,000 people. A whole week of Pesach, we got 4,000 people. Where was everyone running? Where was 100,000 people to Meiron? What is it, Meiron replacing the Har Habayit? We have to show covenant year Har Habayit. This is a mitzvah d'oraisa. There's a way you could be makayim that mitzvah. How do we give it up and exchange it for Meiron? This is what the Chassam Sofer was saying almost 200 years ago. I'd just like to conclude that the pasuk, as Shapsosai Tishmoru Umekdashi Tiro near Hashem, is found twice in the Torah. Once it was read in the Torah Kadosh in the Shabbos before Lag BaOmer. The second time that it will be read is in the end of Pashas Bahar. It's the Shabbos before Yom Yerushalayim. Once again, we're going to hear the words, Es Shapsosai Tishmoru Umekdashi Tiro. This is our chance to fulfill the mitzvah. On Yom Yerushalayim, when it was a nes, when it was Chasdei Hashem, God put the base on Migdash, the Har Habayit, I should say, God put the Har Habayit back in our hands. God gave it to the Jewish people at a time when the Israeli forces were outnumbered 20 to 1, 30 to 1, when no one thought we'd have such a victory like that, when the victory was complete and swift. In 6 days we captured everything and we liberated all the territories that belonged to the Jewish people. Hashem put it in our hands. How can we give up a mitzvah min Torah? You can go up to Har Habayit. You have to go to the mikveh, follow the paths. The paths do not cross the chayil. Plenty Talmidei Chacham are involved in the tours or the paths that are taken today. And with this chus on Yom Yerushalayim, that the day that HaKadosh Baruch Hu returned the Har Habayit to the Jewish people, we will fulfill B'li Neder, the mitzvah of Mikdashi Tiro. We'll mekayim the mitzvah. And with this chus, that we fulfill the mitzvahs, we show Avos Hashem, we show Ava and Yira to the Beis HaMikdash. We should be Zocha to the building of the Beis HaMikdash, to bring in Korban Pesach, and all the mitzvahs that are tied up with the Har Habayit. And this should be the schus that Eliyahu Navi should come, the Melech HaMashiach should come, and we should be Zocha to the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Amen.